Hello, everybody, and welcome for coming. Tonight we have Quentin Rowan reading from from Never Say Goodbye, which is published by Yeti Publishing and has this beautiful cover by Rachel Day. And a few years ago, Quentin was very bad, but now he's back to redeem himself and to read from his beautifully, beautifully written memoir. Thank you.
Thanks, Margarita. Thanks for coming. Thanks to St. Mark's for having me. And so I read this book and just about everything that's, about my life as a plagiarist. And it's also about my life, but just not the plagiarism. And that aspect of it is maybe not as eventful. But it's all in here. And I shouldn't, there's sort of a cheat sheet if you want the whole end. There's a mini book within a book, Magic Circles, which is just the everything that happened last year. So you can skip ahead and just read that if you get bored. But I tried to sort of trace the origins of everything back to when I was in college. So I'll just read a few sections, short sections. As the days reddened and the nights brightened, I spent more and more time with Catherine or alone in the library. I discovered a section that was just shelves upon shelves of old literary magazines bound together in wine-red hardcover editions. New World Writing, Transatlantic Review, Transition, the Paris Review. It was all there. History of literary fiction in the first half of the century as collected in periodicals. Parts of Finnegan's Wake as Joyce was working on it, same with The Making of Americans. In Transatlantic Review, British and American novelists and poets and playwrights from the 60s I'd never heard of, like Heathcote Williams, Gavin Ewart, B.S. Johnson, Giles Gordon, D.M. Thomas, Trevor Hoyle, Alan Lelchuk, Jay Newgaboran, Saul Urich, Shirley Schoonover. Who were these people? I'd never heard of them. I was nearly 20 years old, foggy-headed in the extreme, sitting in a library, writing longer and longer poems that were beginning to look more and more like short stories. And here were these names unknown to me, and I assumed the rest of the world. So their work began to creep slowly into mine. I started lifting passages from poems and short stories in these old magazines, which I considered or rationalized to be lost to the dusts of time in the days before Google and Project Gutenberg, when the internet was just being born, or in its goofy-faced adolescence. I took these words, stole them into my work, library thief in the crossbeams and crosshairs of history's gauzy book memory, rationalizing it all, wrong is right, or maybe just okay, or who's gonna know. That was the general overtone and where it all began. So after I had this first story that I'd kind of put together from other, used this old pirate narrative along with weird scientific words I found in the Oxford English Dictionary to kind of try to make up my own language. Sort of weird futuristic pirate story was accepted by the Paris Review, and that was when I started realizing, oh, I might get caught. It was probably about 2021. After Catherine left, the nausea continued. I quit coffee for a week, thought I was dying, went back to it. Zantac helped. Occasional vomiting on the subway, between trains, at the end of the tracks, where the lights flicker off like small night galaxies. But dramatic force drove me back to school for one more year. And early on received a call from Steve that George wanted to run my C story. I'd sent it in to James, and the younger staff had mixed feelings, but George liked it. They cut some things, then didn't run it for 2 years. But in that time, the lead up, I had the distinction of having a story out in the Paris Review while still a senior in college, and thought to myself, here I come, world. Unfortunately, that meant pushing certain thoughts night thoughts away, the truth, essentially. I didn't know when the story would come out, and I thought, and though I didn't find it likely anyone would recognize the words of Captain Voss's voyage that easily, I knew that I'd taken them. Truth would come to me at night mostly, like William Wilson in the Poe story, and sit with me like a lost spirit in the room. It told me, this lost spirit, that I'd deviated somewhere from it, from plain facts, from the things, the terms and ideas we use to measure basic goodness. I'd ask him, William Wilson, is it that simple? Truth, good, lie, bad? But there was no answer. And in that silence that extended over the selves of many years, I took to heart the notion that the truth was different for everyone. Hadn't Einstein said so? Perhaps on all fours one day I'd be convinced otherwise, but back then I thought, maybe I can find a way to make my truth something other than yours. When the light was back and I'd had some coffee and the thing that was burning up my interior like an acid spirit would leave with a gurgle, and I could have my illusions back, because there were desires in the daytime light, desires for recognition and approval, desires to write more, steal more, to make something great at any rate, no matter what it took. So, skipping ahead, all through my sort of battle, went back and forth with my conscience about what I was doing through my 20s. And, we were a perfect match in those days. Catherine was an opera singer who'd lost faith in her own voice, and I was hurting myself to the library to steal the works of other writers because I'd forgotten if I had one. All around me, colors of the world changing, days burrowing into themselves, minds opening liberally under the eyes of the World Wide Web. Thinking Keats was already dead at my age. Thinking Rimbaud was trading arms in Abyssinia. Thinking maybe Hawthorne had it right, holed up in a room at home for 10 years, did nothing but write. And even then hated Fanshawe so much he had it torched after publication. Thinking, who am I to even deign to compare myself? Who am I to begin? To begin was to remember, was to begin to chase that, well, dragon in consternation and premature decay, to steal more words to fit my ends. Begin again, the grand old age of 22, nothing doing. Down the old Housefield roads, to the F train, to the G train, back to my box on Grand Street, wondering, was I paralyzed mentally? Had I merely petered out from the attendant fears of work, money, apartment, relationship, all widespread in their emotional whereabouts and commanding of concern? No more room to dream. Because once, even when I was a word thief, I could still write this or that bit to make it all work, and now nothing, theft alone, drying up. So just skipping ahead to more recent events, just read a little bit about the stuff that happened with the thriller. An answer to the obvious question that arrives here, the answer is yes. I knew this was wrong. I knew theft was wrong, but began to view the sacred rules and immortal codes we use to perceive these kinds of situations as either slightly bendable, slightly permeable, or as not applying to me. And here I'd come to see the publication of my spy book as my last chance after 15 years of toil, both real and unreal, at any kind of success in the spheres of the literary and the actual. So I was willing to bend reality in my mind to see it come to fruition, thinking I would just die if anyone else knew. But I know I can stand the gradual wearing away of my own conscience, if it means not so much literary success as financial success on some level. If I could sell the movie rights, perhaps I could actually support a family one day. We were about to go looking at small presses when David, that was my agent, called to say he'd heard from a brand new, not even launched imprint at a large publishing house I really admired. They wanted to talk the next day. He thought I'd probably need to sell it to them a bit and mentioned they wanted to make some pretty substantial changes. That's amazing, I said to him and to my friends, for part of me wanted just to be able to say at long last, look, I have a book deal. While the rest thought, at the terminus of my success lies destruction, or osculation of circles meet here at their consummation, where through reappropriation, reciprocation of my errors will no doubt lead to a year's worth of terror and sleepless nights as a kind of reagent. Thinking I finally won, thinking I finally lost. In the end, my future editor mostly spoke of how he envisioned the book, when it might come out, what format, etc. I told him a little bit about my ideas for the sequel. Somehow the Day of the Jackal came up and we bonded. So no definite date at first, but soon November 3rd, 2011, was put into my mind as the day my life would either begin anew or end entirely. Right angles, intersection of alpha and beta. We went back to the office. Sorry, I'm skipping around a little. Also right-angled, glassine, interstices with windows occluding everything, a Parthenon of viewpoints in the delta of Midtown. Later would come the telephone conversation where he gave me very precisely a series of major changes to make in the plot. They were good changes that would have, in a different situation, made the book something better and stronger. Once I'd heard those magic words, change and edit, my mind was already peregrinating through the unopened pages of my library, looking for scenes that would be appropriate to steal. So roughly, I was told in August I had to hand in all changes on my spy book in November and its sequel in December. I took September off work and took a bus upstate with a bag full of spy novels, probably 15 or so. In those honey vestures, I had a little cabin to stay on off Tannery Brook Road. September felt like summer in those lost estates, mystical with gnats and black streams. But everything outside the boundaries of my skin scene was a blur of green heaven. Knew it was there, sometimes the glory. Could touch it and feel it, but had to keep on finding, typing, deleting, replacing, doing what I did. Strong inclinations to lie out in the sun, to forget, to simply sleep. And I took it all, made it into a goal-oriented thing in my mind, like my editor was a taskmaster school teacher, and I had to just finish these assignments he'd laid out. That way, there was a way for me to stay focused solely on the present, this scene, that scene. Try to forget about the larger equation and the incidental or inevitable meaninglessness of the ordeal. Almost like one step at a time in reverse. The secret hidden from myself in the act of busy work. But the busy work was theft. I'll stop there. Thank you.
I have a question. Do you have a photographic memory? Or near, or like?
I think so. It's more like a visual thing, or associative. Like, I can remember things in relation to other things, like like when I worked in bookstores, I'd always remember, oh, well, that book's there because there's an orange book over, 2 spots over, and it's kind of the same with how I remembered where words are on a page.
So did you remember like large chunks of texts?
No, it's not really so much like that. It's more the location of it within the book, or, but not so much like I couldn't just like look at a page and then recite it to you. So I don't know.
Did like any of the copies of Assassins of Secret make it out like into the world?
Oh yeah.
Are they going like on eBay?
Yeah.
A whole lot of money now?
Well, it came out, the British edition never came out, so those are really hard to find. Mm-hmm. But it came out here. It was out for 5 days, I think. So there are a lot of copies floating around, but they're like $50, the paperback.
And they're like going up, probably.
Well, yeah, they shot right up initially. They were some going for hundreds of dollars, but now it seems to have come back down. So, yeah.
Like stock exchange.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey.
What are you working on now?
Oh, writing a screenplay. I got an offer from a film company who thought maybe the approach I used for Assassin of Secrets might actually work pretty well for a screenplay, which, thinking of screenplays as a series of sort of recycled scenes, put together in a way that would form a narrative. So I've been working on that since April, I guess. Yeah. So.
Anything else? Well, thank you for coming. Books are available
Thanks.
for sale at the front.
Yeah, if anyone wants me to sign a copy, I'll be right here. Yeah.